Hi, I'm Jake G. Water, and this is the Virtual Production Indie Film Guide. Today we're going to go through part 2 of our Composure tutorial. If you haven't seen part 1, it covers a lot of theory and background information, so definitely check that out. But part 2, I'm just going to jump straight into using Unreal. Alright, so I'm going to create a new Unreal project from scratch. I'm going to choose the Film, Television, and Live Events one, and just create a blank project. This is up to you. You can choose Ray Tracing disabled or enabled. If you have an RTX graphics card, you can sometimes turn it to enabled, get some nice perks. And I also leave starter content on because there's a lot of little tools in the starter content that we want to use sometimes. It doesn't really impact your project much because we're not shipping this to customers, we're just using it on our own computer. And I'm going to call this Composure 2. All right, so we have our blank project here, and what we're going to do is create a little scene that we want to set our composure in. So we're going to add a background and a few objects into the scene just to make it look interesting, set up our camera. The first thing I like to do is I become a big fan of using these HDRIs. Now we can actually go to here. You can actually go to HDRIhaven.com. And even though Unreal comes with some default HDRIs, you can check these HDRIs out here and download the one that you think is going to work. So let's see, let's add one. I want to do outdoor, not sunrise, outdoor, and then tree maybe. And the reason you might choose one of these HDRIs is you actually want to pick one that sort of will match the lighting conditions that your scene is taking place in. They're not always, in most VFX workflows, the HDRIs are not actually shown in the final output. They're only used for lighting. But because our whole scene is virtual, I've become a fan of actually using these as like the backdrop in the background. So I'm going to pick this scene. It looks like it has good lighting. It will be easy to use in our example, and I kind of like it. So if you go down here, you can download the any of the resolutions. Now, Unreal will definitely choke if you try to use like the 16K. I'm not sure about the 8K, but I have had success with the 4K, so I'm going to download the 4K. And then I want to bring this file up, and what I'm going to do is drag and drop this into Unreal. There we go. Okay, so now that I've got it in the scene, I actually have to go in and make a few adjustments. Otherwise, when I drop it into the background, it won't look very good. And one of the adjustments is if I go in here and then I click this Show Advanced, maximum texture size. So I was just reading this, and it says that right now it's going to be a maximum resolution of 512. Now I think that means 512 by 512. So why don't I try typing like 4096. Now whenever I do this, Unreal kind of pauses for a few moments while it's computing whatever it needs to compute. So it's finished whatever it was doing, and seems to be functioning well. So that was changing the texture size. And then the other thing I need to do in here is level of detail. Instead of from texture group, no MIP maps. And I forget exactly why you change these settings, but I've watched my own videos that recommend these settings, and they seem to work. I'm not an expert on HDRIs, but I think I understand kind of how to use them in this workflow. Other things to check out, make sure sRGB is unticked. These HDRIs are actually linear like color maps. They're less like photos and more like plots of light. And it's going to use that to help inform the lighting of your scene. So I'm going to save this, close it, and I can't just drag this in. It won't work. See, if I did that, it just made a material. That's not what I'm going for. What I need to do is actually go over to the place actors, and I take the HDRI and drop it in. And you can see that there's actually a light map already installed. The one I chose is pretty similar because I want to keep the example simple. So if I look around, first of all, notice that the floor and the HDRI are sort of like clipping like this. I can take care of that because I actually don't need this floor. I'm going to just delete it from the world outliner. And then I'm going to click on the HDRI again, and I'm going to do some calculations about where cameras and things should be. So I'm actually going to center this. So I just click this to make sure everything's in the center. One thing we might do later, maybe in another video, is use this to rotate the HDRI. And sometimes you do that to make sure that the sun in the HDRI is coming from the right spot. Either way, this looks pretty good. And if I zoom in to, maybe closer to the center, let me slow this down. If I go to closer to the center and I look around, it looks pretty good. Now there are a few settings you can change here, like size. Whoop. This maybe my HDRI is too high because it froze a little bit. Let me click this, and I'm going to type in a much lower number, and you can see what will happen. Okay, so 45, and if you look around, and I start to move like this, you can see that the floor almost is too close, because some of the floor in the background now looks like it's part of a wall. So this size is like, if I zoom way out, let me zoom way out. You can see that it's sort of like projected onto this dome that you're in. So what you want to do is size it such that the dome and the floor of the HDRI coincide. So let's maybe put that back to normal. And you can see that's actually a bit too big. I'm gonna zoom out maybe a lot. All right. And I know this is supposed to be about composure, but bear with me. So that, maybe a little bit bigger actually, 160. And I'm just looking that this floor kind of ends at the edges of the dome. Don't worry about the stretching, because when we go back to the center here, if you're in the center, the stretching won't appear as much. But the other thing we can do is adjust this thing called the projection center, and that will pull it up or down. So I'm going to mess with this a bit. And it actually looks like it's lagging a lot on my machine. So choosing that 4K texture might have been a bit ambitious. Maybe for you, unless your computer has really got a lot of horsepower, you should choose a lower resolution texture. All right, that looks good enough for what we're trying to accomplish right now. Let's just add a camera to the scene. So I'm going to move my camera speed back down so I'm not rushing all over the place. And if I go over to place actors and I type Cine Camera, I'm going to pop that into the scene. And what I would like you to do is reset the position of this camera. And then, because you're sort of 0, 0, 0, you're buried in the ground, bring it up to about 150, 150. That's about where, a normal camera would be sitting. We're actually going to measure the exact height a little later. But this is kind of perfect for now. If you want to rotate this camera around, just have a look. Okay, this looks pretty good. Zero out that rotation. And if you don't like the background, what I actually want you to do is to rotate the HDRI a little. So I'm going to rotate it just a bit. Yeah, I kind of like this one. Let's have a look. That looks nice. Okay, so that's going to be my shot. And the reason I said rotate the HDRI is we're just going to do some calculations with X, Y, and Z. And I don't want to have things at an angle. In practice, you can definitely rotate your camera and all that, but we're trying to keep things simple here. All right, so on to the next step. All right, the next thing we want to do is bring in our video source. So I'm going to right click and under media, do a media bundle, and I'm going to call this the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera. Name it whatever you like. And I have the Genlock 8K with 4 ports on the back of my computer, and I'm running an SDI cable into the first one. So if I go to Blackmagic Media Source and then open this up a little bit, it says invalid here under configuration. We're going to adjust that. So hey, look, these are all the settings from my Genlock. If you have a different thing, it might look a little different. Now, port 1 is what I have it under, but I'm under this 23.976 FPS. Now, the Genlock, from my understanding, is super picky. All these settings have to match exactly or nothing's going to show up. Under timecode format, I don't set anything. I am going to use timecode later, but I have found this doesn't affect the timecode, which I'm going to set later. There's another setting I'm going to use for that. So I'm going to hit save, close, and then just drag this into the scene. And you can see here that this is my, this is what I'm showing on my camera over there right now. Say hello to Bob. Bob's the head on a stick, and Bob is holding a color chart for us, which is really nice. Now you can probably see that this color chart is definitely not reproducing accurate colors. They should be nice and vibrant. That's because the signal coming in is Rec 709, and we probably haven't accounted for that yet. So the first thing I want you to check is double click in here, and under video, see this is sRGB input. It might be tempting to turn that on if you have an sRGB input, and Rec 709 is very close to sRGB. But I want you to turn this off because we are going to use OCIO for our color management and no Unreal tools, because we trust OCIO more than we trust Unreal. So, and if you need a video on how to set up OCIO and download it, I've got that on the Virtual Production Indie Film Guide. I might also, so go to the link to this article on vpifg.com, and that will link to the any dependencies we talk about. All right, so I'm going to close this. Even though this looks wrong, this is exactly what we want for right now. Okay, last thing is, say the video doesn't show up for you here. Like, I'm going to hit request close media to turn that off, and it's just not showing up. Sometimes it's hard to know if you set up Unreal incorrectly or what. So if you installed the Blackmagic tooling and you go here and you type Blackmagic Media Express, open that. This is the app that comes with Blackmagic, and it can connect to the Genlock. Over here are all the ports. And then here you have log, playback, and edit to tape. I'm going to click log and capture. So what should happen is, if you are on the right device, it should show up here. And if it's not showing up here, it will not show up in Unreal. So what I would do is open this up and debug it until it shows up here. And once it's here, you know that the video is making it to your system, so you can just deal with Unreal. Another thing you can also try is we're going to record timecode later, and sometimes getting Unreal to like find the timecode is a little difficult. So I'm going to actually click capture for just a moment, and then done. And then if I double click this video, this is just the duration, forget that, but look at in and look at out. And if in and out are matching the time code that you think they should be, then the time code is coming through correctly. So I've verified that both the image and the time code are coming through correctly. This is sRGB display, but you know, it's showing a Rec 709 signal, and they're really, really close. So it might look a tad bit dark, but it looks pretty good. So I say it works. I'm gonna close and not save that. And then if I go back here, the way to get this going again, request play media. The other thing to note that I think in Windows, only one program can open a video device at one time. So if I'm playing the media here, and then I went back to Media Express, I don't think it'll show up. Yeah, there's a problem. It's not going to show up. All right, so we're back here, and we've got the video working. So on to the next step. All right, so we've got the video coming through, and next thing I want to do is get into Composure. So I'm going to actually hide this. I still want it in my scene, but I don't want it like visible. The reason I want it in my scene is if it's in my scene, then usually the media is playing, it's open. And if it's not in the scene, Composure might not be able to use the media source. Okay, so what I want to do is go over to Window and then come down to this Composure Compositing. So that opened this tab here for me. Tab might open who knows where in your app, but you can drag it wherever you want. Like you can pull these apart and put them wherever. I kind of like having it over here, so I'm just going to be working out of this spot. And Composure is sort of like a sandwich that we're making out of the video, the CG element, and anything else that we want to squish together into the final output. So if I go into here and I right click, just do create new comp, and then empty comp is the one you use. You can call it anything you want. I'm going to call it Composure. So right now, there's not really anything in the scene, which is why this is showing empty. There's no video that it's sending us. So what I want to do is I want to add the video that we're taking and weld it into this Composure. So I'm going to add a layer element, and then there's a bunch of options. Media plate is for these video sources. We'll do CG layer later. That's for the virtual scene, capturing the things you see in the Unreal window. But media plate is first. Got to open this triangle to see it. And I'm also going to rename this. I'm going to call this the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera. All right. So now, you see nothing because we haven't told it to use the media bundle that we just set up. So if I'm clicked into this, either under the Composure window or the element is also here in the world outliner. Let me make that bigger. Here. So it's here and it's here. This is just kind of a shortcut way of seeing it all together. I can actually look down, and in the details panel, there's a lot of stuff. Most of this doesn't matter. Transform doesn't matter. Rendering, replication, collision, input. Like the only thing that matters for these Composure tabs is the Composure piece. This will apply to all of the ones that we're using. And in here, there's a bunch of settings that we're going to need to configure. So first one is I have to tell it where to find the video under input. Luckily, it's got one input defined already. And if I click down into all the triangles, I see media source. Just click this open. And if you have done that media bundle step, you'll usually see your camera setting here. So that's done. That's it right there. And if you want to see a bigger version of it, you hit P. And this window is something you can put to the side or on a second monitor if you want. All right, I'm just going to close that. So there it is, anytime I need it. Now the next thing I want to do though is, remember I said the colors are wrong? This is where we're going to correct them. And to do that, we first need to create a element called an OCIO config. Now I have another video that goes over this in a lot of detail, so I'm going to go quickly over this. I'm going to call this OCIO configuration file. And then where did I put it? I think I put it in... So if you've downloaded it, like in my previous video, you'll have all these, you'll have at least one of these ACES configs. I'm going to click 1.2, and it's always this config.ocio file. Open it, and then in here is where that config defines hundreds of color spaces. We're going to just pick the ones we want. And for the purposes of this video, I'm just going to use sRGB, Rec 709, and the Unreal color space is linear sRGB, so you always want that one. And then there are others that we would add, but check out the OCIO video. We'll use those at a later step, not in this video. So I'm going to close this. And then now if I go to transform, I'm going to click this, open the transform passes. So this is where we're going to do our chroma keying and pull out the green screen and stuff. But before we do any of that, I'm going to click plus to add a new transform at the bottom. And then this is going to be this open color IO pass, and then drag it all the way to the top. It's the first thing that we want to do. So again, just like open all the triangles, and then you'll get this empty config source. Just drag the OCIO config in there. And then if you watch the OCIO tutorial, it's all about taking something from a color space to another color space. So I'm using Rec 709 output. If you don't know how to get your camera sending Rec 709 output, I do have another video about that. Just go to the video, just go to the link in this, the link to vpifg.com in in the description to this video, that links to all the dependencies that you need, but it's on the site. So go there, and then destination color space. Anytime you're bringing something into Unreal, it's linear sRGB. And notice the moment we did that, this looked a lot better. I'll hit P, make it bigger. You can tell already the colors look way more accurate. However, they're still slightly off, and I will go into that in a second. Okay, so that covers the input transform. But now we're in linear sRGB. So this is displaying on my monitor, which is definitely not linear sRGB. It's sRGB. I've calibrated it as sRGB. So there's another 2 tabs here that we're going to have to look at. And one of them is this preview tab. So preview is this thing that I'm looking at on screen right here. If I hit P, this is the big preview. There's the smaller preview. I can apply a color transform to the preview, but notice that this says inherited or override. Aha. Notice how these are like parent and children of each other. So inherit means it's going to use the preview settings from this one. Because we're going to have a lot of elements, it makes sense to define the preview on the Composure, and the other ones can just inherit it. So remember, everything's in this Composure tab. So let's look down, preview, output transform none. So what's actually happening here is this is trying to display linear sRGB on an sRGB monitor. And I don't know if you can tell, but I think that's why it's like a little dark. Yeah, so if I hover my mouse over this gray patch, it's coming in at like 0.18, which for sRGB, it should be closer to, I think, 0.36 or 0.4. All right, so let's go to here and, oh, no, go to the Composure piece at the top. And under Preview Transform, hello, there's another Open Color I/O pass. Perfect. Open all the triangles, drag it in. And remember, when we're bringing something in, we go from whatever to linear sRGB. When we're going out, we go the other way. So we're going to go from linear sRGB. Okay, what is my monitor? All that matters is what's the monitor I'm looking at. That's just sRGB. So I'm going to click that. And then let's see, compositing pass. I'm just checking any of the other settings. Yeah, these all look good. So let's go back here. And I don't know about you, but I can definitely notice a difference. And now the level is showing the correct level of about 34. Wherever I hover my mouse, it's showing me the RGB down here of the background. And this is like a color chart that I've set the exposure roughly correct on my camera, so I know what some of these values should be. Like the black is supposed to be around 0.03, the white is supposed to be around 0.8 to 8.86, and this is like 0.36 to 0.4. So I would say this setting is a little dark. I might need to check, adjust the exposure on my camera, but it's way more correct than it was before. And because I know it's in the right color space, I can go, oh, that's low, and then set the exposure rather than mess with color settings. Okay. The last thing we want to do is notice how nothing is coming through on Composure. Like this shows something, and this is part of the Composure, but Composure's not showing anything. So the reason for that is that by default, Composure doesn't know how to mix things together. So what you need to do is actually click on Composure, go to the Composure setting, and forget inputs, forget preview, forget everything, go to transform. And then in here, it's the first one, compositing element material pass. Open all the triangles. Notice there's a missing piece. That's the piece we need to fill in. I'm going to, whatever, it doesn't need a pass name, but create a new material. And the way I do that is just click this none, create new material, and I'm going to Composure material. All right, let's open this up. And I'm going to put this tab next to it because I want to go back and forth. So the way this works, and don't ask me why it works this way, is we need to have material, textures that we're importing here, which will correspond to these layers. And you can have as many as you want. You could have tons of layers in here. We're only going to have a couple. And we need the name of the layer. So Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera. If I go back, and if you right click on here, you get all the possible things that could put up that could go into this. And you want to type like 2D param. And it's this texture sample parameter 2D, and then name it whatever you named the layer. Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera. Okay, perfect. Now there's a lot of options on this side, but if you click over here under Material Domain, and this is actually a post-processing effect, so just set it to post-process, hey, there's only one option. So you can either drag RGBA or RGB. I'm going to drag RGBA for now because that's the one we're going to use. Sometimes I've had trouble with the deck link outputting a signal which included RGBA, and I'll show you how to deal with that. But for now, let's just hit apply, save, go back. And if we click Composure, notice that now something comes up. That's awesome. The last thing I'm going to do is actually wire Composure back out my deck link so that I can feed that into a like a monitor or a capture device. So let's go over here I'm still clicking on Composure, close transform, close input, close preview, open output, nothing there, add a plus, and then I want this compositing media capture output. Open the triangles, and there's a missing piece, so we're going to add something there. And then here it is, Blackmagic media output. So I'm going to click that. I'm going to call this deck link 4 out, or what is my deck link? 3. I think it's 3. It's 2 or 3. I'll guess 1, and then I'll try the other. Where is it? Deck link 2 out. All right, let's drag that in. And then let's do a quick check to see if it's working. No, it doesn't appear to be working for me yet. Oh, it's because I haven't configured it. So go in and again, obviously 1 is what's coming in, so it can't be that. So I'm going to click 2, and then very important, set the frame rate to like the frame rate that we're going to be using here. So this 23.976. Apply. And then under timecode format, this should be VITC because that's what the like SDI signals that DeckLink is using will use. And if you feed that out, then anything that's recording your footage will actually inherit the timecode that Unreal is using, which will inherit the timecode from your camera. And this can be used later to sync everything up in post-production. So say we record this output, that's like the green screen composite, and it looks pretty good, but there's some weird errors. If we have the original source footage of both from Unreal and from the camera, we could go back, re-render it at a higher quality or with some post-processing effects, and then like insert it into the exact same timecode, and it should all work. So I'm a big fan of using timecode in all these workflows. Close that. And yeah, so I have my monitor here, and it's definitely showing up. Now, maybe I can cut to this, but you'll also notice that it's really dark. And the reason is, again, we weren't using OCIO to manage our color. Look at this thing that says color conversion on our output. Compositing tone map pass. Unreal is doing this. It's managing the color. Remember what we said we don't want to do is let Unreal manage color. So click that. You should know the drill by now. Open Color IO. OCIO, from linear sRGB to whatever your monitor is or whatever space you want to record it in. If you were recording this for like an ACES workflow, you might put ACES 20651 or ACES CG or something in here. That would work just fine. I'm just going to do it in Rec 709 because I just want it to look good on my monitor, and when I record it, I don't want to do much processing to it. So I've done that, and when I look at my monitor, it looks dead on. So good stuff. Just to do a quick review, OCIO is used a couple times. Once when inputting the video footage, once in the preview section here, and also in the output, which goes over the deck link. And notice that for the preview on my sRGB monitor, I'm transforming to sRGB. And for the deck link, going to like an HD monitor, I'm going to Rec 709. So you have this freedom to kind of mix and match all the color spaces. All right, so on to the next section. All right, so here's our scene right now. And we want to add a CG, we want to add the CG part to our Composure. Right now it's just showing a person with a green screen. So go back to Composure and right click and add another layer element. Instead of media plate, choose this CG layer. The CG layer is the world you're seeing in Unreal. So I'm just going to call this Unreal. You can call it whatever you want. And notice that if I hit P for the preview, this is more or less a mirror of what the camera is seeing right here. And you might think, okay, how did it know to use that camera? Remember, when we click something in this Composure, one of these Composure objects, the only tab we care about in details is Composure. So if we look at input, it says camera source inherited. And if I go up to here and I go to Composure, let's see, target camera actor none. So that tells me that it's just sort of randomly picking one. And I guess that's okay, but say you had multiple cameras, you can always override this and then specify the camera you want. So doesn't matter, you know, if it looks right, you don't need to touch this, and if it doesn't look right, just go in and fix it. We're already in the right color space, so we don't have to do any input transforms. And then the preview is inherited, so that's gonna, you know, render. That's going to render correctly on our display. All right, so we've got our CG element, and we want to match this up to the real life camera. And when we kind of take the CG element and the real life one, we're going to smush them together. And what we're hoping is that, it looks realistic. And there's like so many little details that are sort of going to add up to making this look realistic. And one of them is these camera settings that we're going to go through. You know, if I click on this camera, here are all my camera settings under the details panel. And I just want to talk about like how changing these is going to change the look of this. So, you know, here's focal length for the camera. And if I, you know, bring that up or bring that down, it's obviously changing the look of the scene. Now, adjusting this doesn't adjust this, not unless you have a really fancy setup. So we can't just put it anywhere. Like if I did this and I merged it with the, like me, it's gonna look super weird because I'll be at a close focal length and this will be at a far focal length. So what we want to do is match these settings like as close as possible. There's probably a couple different ways that you could do this and get the same result. I'm gonna kind of talk about them a little, but my caution is that you sort of have to sit and think about this a little bit every time. One thing I want to do quickly is just discuss this concept of this like virtual camera matching. And I've got an article on vpifg.com. It's linked to from the article in this description. And here I talk about sensor size. So sensor size is like when people say a full frame camera or an APS-C camera or micro four thirds camera, that's actually talking about the little sensor in the camera and how big it is. And the smaller you make the camera, if you have the exact same lens, it has this, you're only like the lens is projecting an image like a circle. And the smaller you make the camera, it has this effect almost like you're zooming into the image. So if you look here, here's an example of two images where the focal length is the same and the sensor size changes, and it definitely looks like you've zoomed in. Now if I go down, I actually try this experiment where as I shrink the sensor size, I make the focal length smaller. So you shrink it and it's a really small focal length. So here's an example of a micro four thirds sensor with a 10 millimeter focal length. I put some boxes in the air and a person and an HDRI background just to give it some depth. And then that's 10 millimeter lens. Here's the same photo on a 1000 millimeter lens, but I made the sensor size just large enough to like mathematically balance that. And what I want you to notice is that these images are the same. So what it's telling me and what it should be telling you is that the sensor size and the focal length in Unreal are like perfect offsets. So that a little bit complicates things because you could just change one or the other or both in a slightly different way. And I just want to say be careful around this. So because any of those options will produce the same result. Now, in a real camera, in a physical camera, sensor size affects image quality and other things. So they're outside of Unreal, they're definitely not identical, but in this perfect world of Unreal, they 100% balance out. I also include some information on like calculating how your sensor size might change. And there's this wonderful tool from Daniel Scott Films, this crop factor calculator that you may also want to check out. So if I go back to Unreal, okay, I want to change my film back and my focal length to match my camera. Now, as you saw, my camera is set to 18 millimeters. It's got a micro four thirds sensor, which I know the dimensions for that. It also has this speed booster thing that effectively decrops the lens by 0.64. So I have 3 numbers. I need to turn it into 2 numbers. So what I'm going to do is take the 0.64 and either shove it into the focal length or the film back. I think it makes more sense to shove it into the focal length because the film back is X and Y. So I'm going to set this to the actual film back size of my micro four thirds sensor, which is 17.7 by 10 millimeters. And then I'm going to change this focal length to the 18 millimeters, but adjusted through the speed booster. So it's 18 times 0.06 or 0.64. Okay, so 18 millimeters times 0.64 is 11.52. So I'm going to put that into my focal length. All right. So that was a lot. I think, but this is one of those like subtle things, especially when you start to move the camera, that it will either be really noticeable if you do it wrong, or you might get lucky. The next thing I want to do though is look at focus. So let's put this stuff away and then let's look at focus settings. So focus is like, everyone knows what focus is. Let me pull the focus into 1.5 centimeters away from the camera. All the background is blurry. Okay, I could put it to 10, 20, it starts to look like the camera's really focusing in. So you can 100% add focus here, but I'm going to show you a way to turn this off. And there's actually a step in the workflow that we're working on where we can just artificially add focus in post-production, because we can also export a depth map here. So what I'm going to do is I think I have to go press the tilde key to get this little command prompt. And if you type depth of field, you want to go to this depth of field quality and go to 0. And then that's just going to disable any depth of field effects. So now it doesn't matter what our focus is. So maybe just put it back to the default and forget about it. Okay, so let's look around. It looks pretty good. I'll reset that back to 0. Okay, now what happens if we go back to Composure and click on this Composure? Well, we did set up the CG camera. How come when we click Composure, we're only seeing the green screen? It's because we haven't wired it in to this material. Remember this material over here? This guy right here. That's this one. So let's open it back up. We gotta combine these materials and send them to the emissive color. So, okay, the second thing here is called Unreal, so remember. And I'm just gonna copy paste this to make it easy, but then rename it Unreal. Okay, so here's the question. How do we combine these? They're 2 videos. Do we remove the green screen here? We actually could, but before I do this, let's go back and click on the green screen piece. And then remember we have this color transform pass and there were these things we kind of skipped over. Now let's go visit them. Chroma Keyer, this is gonna be it. This is gonna be the thing we're gonna use. And what you wanna do is add a key color. And right now it's set to black. So we wanna set it to green. You can like eyedropper it, but I also like just kind of manually setting it. And what I do is I just sort of dial it in, because this way I can kind of, go in the direction that I think gives me the best key. All right. I actually quite like this key. I'm going to hit OK. And you'll notice there's still a few things that are wrong. So in the same section under material parameters, oh, look at all these settings. Now, the one that bugs me the most is the corners, the vignetting. So devignette outer is like lets me pull this out. And then you can also mess with this de-vignetting amount. And here's where you sort of just eyeball everything. I'm actually going to use the P key to make this nice and big. And you can see there's like this green halo. I want to see what I can do to get rid of that. So I just sort of go down, like, you know, scrubbing these and seeing if it makes a difference. You know, that's not what we want, so reset that. Alpha. Okay, if I pull this alpha left, it sort of is, it's giving me a slightly better. Okay, sort of like that. And then black clip, I'm gonna scrub left and right. I'm gonna pull this up a bunch. Let's maybe make it like 30. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Whoop. Oh, I don't like these settings. I'm gonna reset it. Okay, so that's good for this chroma key pass. And then we can clean it up a little if you go to despill. So notice there's a green halo. We can actually get rid of that by adding the same color to the despill property. So this will take, you know, whatever color you select here and essentially turn it to, I think, black and white. All right, that looks pretty good. And then the last section, a road. Whoop. If I just go straight through these material parameters, usually what I just do is mess with this like kernel size. All right, so I think this is pretty good. I recognize it's not perfect, but I am not a perfect green screen person either. So, okay, Composure is still just showing this one thing, but now our image has an alpha channel. So we can actually go through and see this RGBA. I'm going to drag that off, and I'm going to say we want this over. So we're saying that the camera, after being keyed, is over top of the background. And if you think about this sandwich, that's actually going to work out perfectly. Apply, save, and there we go. Where is it? Here. So there's our combination. All right, so I want you to notice, look at the very top of this image here. And then you can also see in my green screen that the green screen doesn't actually fill the whole camera. And this is a really cool feature that we can add because the green screen actually only needs to be behind the subject. It doesn't need to fill the whole camera. We're going to use something called a garbage matte, which sort of says, well, anything outside of this general region, just pretend it's all green screen and only, you know, be picky about what's inside this region. So what you do is you make a region that sort of fills up the character and you make it big enough so they can move a little bit without like leaving that region. And what we can actually do is we can even make a more sophisticated version of that. And the first time I saw this, I thought it was super cool, but we basically make a green screen in this world that like mimics the green screen in our real world. And then we can say anytime you're not viewing the fake green screen, also assume you're not viewing the real green screen, and then, you know, math and stuff, and you can make it all work out. So I'll just go through it. So first thing we need to do is add a plane, and let's pull this up, rotate it to face the camera. That's perfect. Probably want 90 degrees. Yeah, there we go. And then I am going to, actually, I like zeroing everything to start with. Pull that up and then pull that back. And then, okay, so here is where you can measure your real life green screen, and that's probably what I'm gonna do. So give me a second. All right, so I'm gonna measure a couple things here. One is just the height of the green screen. So that is 88 inches high. Maybe I wanna pull it in by an inch because of the black piece at the top. So 87 or 86 inches should be enough. And then I also want to measure how far it is from my camera. So you can just kind of hook it on to, this is just a approximate. Okay. just approximately. So that was about 100 inches. So what did I say? 86 inches tall, about 100 inches from the camera. I'm going to input the same settings into Unreal and have it match as closely as possible. In terms of the width, this is really wide. I don't think we're going to have a problem, so I'm just going to eyeball the width. All right, see you back there. All right, so I said it was 88 inches high, and I got to do some mathing. So let's go over here. It was 88 inches to centimeters. So this is 223 centimeters. So by default, the plane is 200 centimeters, I think, because it's 2 meters. So I got to scale it up by this. Or maybe, okay, I actually think it's only 1 meter. So wait, I got to go about 100. Oh, I guess 2.23. 2.23. All right. Oh, I actually want to unlock this. Or maybe it's fine. Okay, and then I said it was 100 inches away. So 100 inches to centimeters, 254. So let's put this to 254. All right. And if I look here, I need to put this on the ground. Okay, so the green screen, like that white thing should match up with the green screen from the camera, but it's not. So why is it not matching up? Well, first of all, I think that my green screen is slightly rotated relative to the camera, so I'm going to rotate it. Yeah, let me turn rotation clipping off. And then the other reason could be that I have my camera at the wrong height. So let's click on the camera. And where did I say this was at? 150 centimeters? Let me just measure that as well. So I'm going to measure the height of the camera to the middle of the lens, and it's 154 centimeters. I realize I have centimeters on here, which is cool. Okay, let's make this 154 centimeters. Right, now that is just definitely not matching up, is it? Why is that? Maybe I messed up the focal length calculation. There's so many little settings. Because, okay, here, let me explain. So I actually measured this. So I would expect that white plane should coincide with the top of my green screen almost exactly. It's not. What did I do wrong? Let me get it. Was it 86 inches? 218? I'm actually sure that was 18. Just sending me a plane sitting around. And then so if we did all our calculations correct between the focal length and the film back and with the green screen and everything like that, we would expect that the white plane that we just added, which is our virtual green screen, should coincide with that top border of the real life green screen, and it isn't. I thought about this. I was a little confused at first, and then I realized my real life camera is actually tilted downwards, so it's looking down by a few degrees. And I haven't tilted my camera down here. So what I'm going to do is measure how far tilted my camera is, apply it here, and see if everything lines up. So I measured the tilt on my camera using like the iPhone measuring app, and it came between about -4 and 4 degrees. So if I put maybe 4.5 in here, and I look at the output, maybe a little more, maybe 5.5. And then I'm going to fudge it all the way up to 6, 7. All right. I imagine that some of these calculations are a little sloppy, so that's probably accounting for some of the difference, but it mostly matches up. The plane needs to be a little wider, so let me make it wider. I'm going to unlock the width and which of the, yeah, there it is. So let's scale this to like just 5, make it nice and wide. Okay. And then just for kicks, you don't have to do this, but I'm going to create a new material and call it green screen matte. Open it up, and I'm just going to make it like a faux green screen. Give it a base color, give it a roughness of 1. And then, yeah, that's good. Close it. Let me drop that on the actual green screen. Oh, they're different colors. Well, I I definitely need to do like a pass on color later, but we're not going to do that in this video. Okay, so I have the green screen, but if you look at what the video is recording, like instead of seeing the virtual world, we're seeing the green screen. So we have to deal with that. So we got to go back to Composure, and we go right click, add layer element, CG matte. And then we're going to call this the garbage or green screen. Perfect. And if we look down in here, input type, capture actors, what we want to do is tell this, this is the garbage matte, or going to be used as the garbage matte. In fact, I'm going to call this garbage instead of green screen. Garbage. There we go. That's a little more clear. So I want to add this green screen to the garbage matte. And the reason why is I'm going to subtract it out of what the CG scene sees and add it only to this garbage matte, which I can use in that Composure material. I'll show you all the steps, don't worry. First thing we need to do though is go here, click this, go over to Window, and go to Layers. Layers should be empty. That's totally okay. But now with the garbage matte highlighted, now go to Layers and right click. Add selected actors to new layers, and we're going to call this garbage. So if you had more than one thing, this is why they're using layers. And then now let's go to capture actors, and this is going to give us to include, and it's these layers, and I have one actor in it, which is the garbage matte. Perfect. And then if I go to here, the CG camera, the camera's looking at the green screen. That's not what we want. So if I go to capture actors, and then now instead of include, I say exclude, same garbage layer, it should, have, oh, I totally know why this isn't working. You got to go back here, and it was the plane. That, like, let me rename this to green screen. So I added this to the layer, which does nothing. So I got to click the green screen, and then add this to an empty layer called garbage. All right, and oh look, it automatically started working because I had the include and excludes on. So, but that top bar is still there. So let's go into this Composure material, copy paste, get the garbage layer, and then the garbage layer goes with the camera settings. So let's move this around. And then just as there was a very convenient over node, there is a very convenient in node. So the way to read this is that the camera is inside of the garbage matte. And then we take the result of those two and feed them out. And there you go. Oh, there's still a tiny bit. So maybe I'll tilt my camera back. Where was the camera tilt? I'm gonna go -6 maybe? There we go. All right. So if I look at the image now, it's nice and clean. There's no garbage where the green screen is not, and it's just my actor and the background. So yeah, that's looking pretty good. So just a few more things and then we're done. All right, so we're getting close to the finish line for this video. And if you recall, the way this workflow is going to go is, we have the camera coming in, we have the virtual world, and we're merging them. And we want to feed that out in its like merged format and record it with timecode, because we want to be able to start editing on that footage right away. But if we need to come back to grab the like original sources later, we want all the time codes to match up. So up until this point, we haven't input any timecode, and we're going to do that right now. Now this is one of those things that I talk about in a little more detail on vpifg.com, but I'll go through enough here that you should be able to follow. So to add timecode, let me actually show you where we would put it first. So if we go to project settings and you just type timecode, you get this timecode provider, which is exactly what we're looking for. In fact, provider. Let's narrow it down. Now, if we click this and we were like, oh, Blackmagic timecode provider, that's what I want. Boom. You know, there's no like settings. So it actually doesn't do anything. So what we actually need to do is go back and subclass that Blackmagic timecode provider. So I'm gonna go down to all classes, Blackmagic timecode provider. And this is a blueprint, by the way. If you've never used blueprints, you could probably follow along. There's actually no coding in this stuff, or in our example with them. So Blackmagic timecode provider, select, and Blackmagic custom timecode provider. Perfect. So we'll open that up, and you can ignore all this node stuff here. We actually only need to configure the right-hand side. So what we want to do is set this to whatever the Blackmagic input we want to read timecode from. And we only have the one input. So I'm going to, you know, first I need to set it to the appropriate frame rate of that input. This is the same input as the video is coming over on. But now here, remember I said ignore the timecode in that other place? Here's where you need it. So I'm going to click this, and I clicked VITC. And if you're using the deck link, this is the one. If you're using the deck link in SDI, this is definitely the one to use. If not, let me know. I can start cataloging, you know, how to do this correctly. But this is what I've had success with. So close that. And then what I'm going to do first is bring up the timecode window. So your window might appear somewhere else, but this is my timecode. Now, the timecode on my camera reads 0919, so this is clearly not coming from the camera. So watch what happens, though, when we set the timecode provider to the thing I just created, Blackmagic custom timecode provider. Set it. There we go, 0919, there it is. So the timecode is now coming in. The other thing we want to do is adjust the frame rate to match the incoming footage. So if I go to here and click show FPS, look at this, 44 FPS. Well, you know, we're recording our video at 23. And if we start trying to mix and match these frame rates, it doesn't always work out. I mean, sometimes it looks okay, but as you move the camera, you know, sometimes it looks really janky. So we're also going to go in the same style as creating a blueprint, type Blackmagic again. Custom time step, here we go. And Blackmagic custom time step, enter, and then just same deal, same one. And that should be it. Hit compile, save. Before I add it to the settings, what I want to do is go to developer tools and Genlock. So this is called Genlock. Custom time step in Genlock. Nothing so far. Let's go to settings. And over here, it's custom time step. There it is. That's the one we created. Close. Look at that. And look at our frame rate, 23.987. So all of this is like synchronized together now. Right now, the frame rate in Unreal is synchronized to the incoming frame rate. But we can do one more step, which is synchronize the outgoing frame rate. And the outgoing frame rate is already like 23.97 or whatever, but we can make sure that they're all happening like in lockstep. So I think if we go to here, now that we have Genlock enabled, you can click wait for sync event and hit save. And now the input, output, and Unreal should all be Genlocked together. They're happening in lockstep. All right, so that's all the pieces we're going to cover in this video. There's a lot more to cover. For example, in the future, we're going to cover actually how to record all this. We're also going to cover how to use Take Recorder to take our takes and then be able to replay them back. We're going to cover how to use Movie Render Queue to render out a high quality version. And we're going to talk about how to replace the proxies that we're recording here with the high render versions later. We're also going to talk about syncing up a motion. So right now I didn't move the camera around, but we want to be able to move the camera around. That's the point. So we're going to talk about like motion tracking. There's a lot more to discuss. So I'll post those videos as we get to it. Also, check out vpifg.com for other articles on this same workflow. And yeah, thanks for coming.